Hi, I'm Katie Bush, Director of Client Relations at Bluestone Services. Bluestone Services specializes in providing practice advisory solutions tailored to improve your operational and financial performance. It's my pleasure to introduce your speaker for today, Deborah Nealon. Deborah is the Director of Medical Business Advisors, a division of Bluestone Services. During Deborah's career, spanning over 20 years, she has specialized in working closely with private medical practices as an experienced practice administrator and consultant. Welcome, Deborah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining and giving me the opportunity to share a few tips for success in payer negotiations. My team and I in the Medical Advisory Division of Bluestone Solution Services have learned some valuable lessons while negotiating and renegotiating payer contracts over the years. The process of contract negotiations with a payer can seem intimidating, but it should not discourage a practice or provider from seeking fair reimbursement from the insurance payers for medical services they provide to their patients, the insurer's subscribers. In my experience, most insurance provider representatives want to assist in reaching a mutually agreeable contract with the practice. However, the process can be time-consuming. So before engaging the insurance payer, it's a good idea to assess the availability of your staff and or yourself to commit the time to complete a payer contract negotiation. On average, it used to take about 60 days to negotiate a contract. Now it is taking much longer because the payers are also experiencing staffing issues. My goals of this presentation are to explain the importance of negotiations, how to perform a payer analysis, tips for drafting a proficient negotiation letter, recognizing what is a reasonable offer, best practices for countering payer refusals, and learning from your success and failures. Why are payer negotiations important? Negotiating your payer contracts is critical for maintaining maximum revenue. Oftentimes, I see providers sign their initial participation contracts and not revisit them for many years. Sometimes they cannot even find them. When I ask why, most practices tell me that they don't know where to start, that the task is complex and challenging, and or they simply can never find the time. Every day I see how busy and understaffed most medical practices are, so I understand why most medical practices cannot find the time to negotiate their insurance payer contracts. I always tell them it is time well spent if they could find it or consider outsourcing the project to an expert. With rising costs for medical supplies, staffing, and other overhead expenses, a lot of practices struggle to achieve a reasonable profit, and why it is important to review and negotiate your payer contracts periodically to ensure your practices are receiving optimal reimbursement rates for services provided. So now I would like to show you where to begin. How to perform a payer analysis. Select and collect your data. The right data gives you more control to make better decisions. What data is going to be helpful? Knowing the amount each payer is reimbursing your practice for high-frequency services is helpful. Try not to get caught up in the minutia. You don't need to mine out the reimbursement rate for every code bill. You only need to determine the top 10 to 20 codes billed in your practice, the frequency of those codes, and the current allowable rates per payer, not the payment amount. This is important. Payer amounts will vary because of copays, deductibles, and coinsurances. So be sure to pull the allowable rates per payer. Assemble this data in an Excel spreadsheet for review and comparison after you've collected all data needed. Now, if you can find them, gather the contracts and amendments that need to be reviewed. Focus on your top payers which for most physicians are Cigna, United Healthcare, Aetna, and CareFirst. Examine each contract for renewal date and map out a timeline. You will start with the first payer able to be negotiated according to the renewal date. You may find that more than one payer is ready to be negotiated. I would not advise waiting to complete one contract at a time because the other contracts could renew and you will miss your opportunity to renegotiate until the next renewal period. If your contracts have not been renegotiated in a long time, it's likely they are now renewing annually for one-year terms. Once you have determined which payers you will approach and gathered all your reimbursement rates, you can now use your highest payer as a basis to compare all payers. Often this is Medicare. Sometimes it is not. I find that CareFirst is a greater percentage of the payer mix in the practices I serve, so I leave that payer for last. Increasing the reimbursement rates for all other commercial payer contracts first helps to build a good comparison. Examine the data and determine what your goal is per payer based on the percentages that you've calculated for each. Having a plan of action will help you ace your payer renegotiation. So let's recap before we move on. Assess your contracts and allowable reimbursement rates per insurance payer for your top 10 to 20 high-frequency codes. Create your negotiation letter, which we'll get to next. Evaluate payer proposals and counter-proposals. Review final contracts to be sure all renegotiated terms are included and acceptable. Draft a great negotiation letter. What are the critical elements of your practice to highlight? Unique services you provide, such as non-invasive procedures, mole mapping, a digital health app for wellness tracking, etc. Elements that provide value to patients and insurers. Are you the only provider in a certain area that can provide X service? Can you provide X service to the payer's members for less? Any special training and experience of providers in the practice? This can be board certifications, expertise in the treatment of such as hearing disorders, pain management, or whatever your specialty may be. Use evidence-based data to support your practice. Is important and needs to why your practice is important and needs to remain viable. Do your research to know what to focus on. Growth in the geographic area and therefore an increased need in the community. Specialized training of services and their impact on the population and cost of healthcare. Insurers like to hear how they can save money. Recent increase in cost of materials, staffing, etc. for your practice. The impact your practice has had on the local community. Are you the only provider in the area? How far would patients need to travel if you were not there? Using evidence-based data will strengthen your argument. Don't be shy. This is your opportunity to educate the payer on your value to them and their members. You can also add practice or provider recognition awards. For example, Voted Top Docs by Washington Magazine or other such awards. Finally, state your ask. I am requesting a rate increase of X. After your analysis, you may have discovered a subset of codes that you need a greater percentage on. Include this in your letter. Request a carve-out for those codes. The increased need and the reason why. Once you send your initial request for a rate increase to the payer, be sure to calendar when to follow up if you don't receive a reply. I think a reasonable wait would be 10 days before sending another email. I have never seen a payer respond in full agreement to all initial rate increase requests from the practice. So don't give up, don't get disappointed, and just continue to negotiate. Evaluate the counter offer. At minimum, an offer needs to cover the cost to perform the service. ASCs especially need to consider cost of materials for surgical procedures when evaluating cost of service. Analyzing the offer impact. Offers should be evaluated per aggregate and per code to make sure it's favorable. What is the overall annual increase in revenue for the practice? Have any codes been decreased? Look at if an increase on a particular code will offset on the code with no increase or even a decrease. How to manage the negotiation when a payer refuses to budge. Have a game plan for counterproposal. Know what your goal is. What would you like? 2 to 3% rate increases on average plus escalators if a multi-year contract is required is generally the goal. If your contracts have not been renegotiated for a long time, then you may be seeking a larger increase just to get the reimbursement in line with the market. Determine your deal breaker. What can you not accept less than? I've seen payers grant the initial request for rate increases on the first year, but will not include escalators in the outer years for a 3-year contract. You don't want to agree to any lengthy contract without escalators. If you've hit an impasse with the payer on this element, try to ask for an 18-month contract instead. This way, you will not need to wait long to renegotiate for better reimbursement rates again. Unfortunately, it's possible to encounter an impasse with the insurance payer that you cannot seem to work through. What deals are you prepared to walk away from, and the next step? Is this time to part ways with your payer? Not all payer negotiations reach an acceptable agreement. If the payer refuses to offer a reasonable contract and the revenue for providing services to their members is minimal, you may want to evaluate terminating your participation. This is a scary process, and it should be the last resort. Termination notification. Often payers will reconsider your request when you're prepared to walk away. If you've reached this point, you will need to follow the requirement outlined in your participation contract for sending a termination notice. Most insurance payers require 90-day written notices prior to renewal. This notification will need to be on your letterhead, and I would send it certified. This is, again, the last resort, and most negotiations do not get to this point. So when should you call in a professional negotiator? When no one in-house has the time or feels they can navigate the many complexities of an insurance payer negotiation. If you've finally reached a contract that is mutually agreeable, let's talk about identifying and clarifying vague or unusual, obscure language that you may find in that contract. You need to review the final contract carefully. Is there language in the contract not clear? Contracts with things like payer policies may change or other things that need to be clarified. If you're not sure, ask. Your provider rep will clarify the language that is uncertain to you. And you need to make sure that you understand all elements of the contract. Identifying provisions needing examination, the length of the contract, 2 years, 3 years, and what are the stipulations for ending your contract, 30, 60, 90-day written notice. Escalators, if you've agreed upon them, make sure that they are in the contract. Check your proposed rates for different lines of business as well. Be sure to check for included products and services and excluded services. If the elements that you have agreed to during your negotiation process are absent from your contract, make sure that you turn it back to your provider rep to have it completed and then resent. Think about the future of your practice given the life of the contract. Are you considering a merger or acquisition, an expansion? These are all things that need to be examined and considered before signing a payer contract. Your successes and your failures. Once the contract renegotiation is completed, it's important to document your success and, more importantly, your failures. Learning from your mistakes helps you mitigate or avoid them in the future. I would also add that it's important to document any email addresses of important people that you've talked to or had interaction with, phone numbers, anything that, the entire process. Save all the emails, the back and forth, any sort of documentation that they've sent you. Everything should be documented and put into a folder. And when it's time to renegotiate this contract, you'll have this file to bring out, take a look at it, refresh your thoughts, and have a contact person immediately that you can begin a negotiation with again. Thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it. And I hope this has been helpful for you.